under the age of 18 and has learning disabilities. On June 10th, she went missing. And on June 27th, she was found on Camp Pendleton. Camp Pendleton is a military base in Oceanside, San Diego. She was found in the barracks by military police. She had been sold to a soldier for sex. The military is trying to cover it up. They're trying to cover it up and place majority of the blame on her.
This lady's brave. The aunt's name is Cassandra Perez, and her underage niece went missing for weeks and then wound up dead on a military base that has been known for trafficking humans for the last half-decade.
In Southern California, more than a dozen U.S. Marines are under arrest tonight on charges that include human smuggling. They're based at Camp Pendleton. That's about an hour's drive from the Mexican border. And David Martin has details of the arrest that was done as a public display for the entire unit to see.
I don't think you understand how much cartel money is running through Camp Pendleton for human smuggling and sex trafficking. And like, you need to know the numbers so you can understand why Cassandra's scared for her life or why she thinks the military police would cover up the death of a minor. If you're a fresh high school graduate just joining the military at Camp Pendleton, the cartel is paying you $1 to $2K per person that you drive over the border in your clean-cut uniform. You know what the migrants are paying the cartels? $11 to $15K. And if it's a kid getting trafficked for other shit that I don't even want to talk about, they're worth $3 to $5K. And let's just do some quick math. Let's just say that the camp on the low end traffics about like 50 people a week. That's worth over $40 million to the cartel. So no, I wouldn't put it past the authorities to try and cover the shit up. Not to mention, this has already happened before. So in 2019, they caught 2 different battalions smuggling humans for the cartel. And you want to know what happened to all 24 of those Marines? Fuck nothing. The military police pulled some slick shit and decided to publicize the arrest of all 24 Marines involved. I don't know, to set an example for the rest of the people on the base. But what ended up happening was the judge threw out the criminal charges against the Marines because they said that they had violated their rights by publicizing the arrest. Like, the irony, like, you violated the human trafficker's human rights.
I have the lead detective's name and phone number, and we'll be releasing it to the public pending confirmation from our attorney. Our hope in doing so is to both bring attention to my niece's case and to ensure that this does not go away upon release of more details.
I can't emphasize enough how fucked up this situation is. Especially if you're a military or service member, you know how bases work. A minor who can't consent to anything presented her underage ID to a bunch of different adults and then was like, oh yeah, go on and inside. And then a couple weeks later, she's found dead. That on a base that is known to have at least 1 report of SA a day, over 623 over the course of 4 years. Like, the fuck, guys?
You know, it's kind of hard to stop a border crisis when Border Patrol agents are the ones aiding it. So recently, a Border Patrol agent got caught taking $25,000 in bribes to just let people in and help distribute, you know, all the good candies.
Going on, a local Border Patrol agent is accused of taking bribes to let in unauthorized migrants and drugs this week. The U.S. Attorney's Office says Agent Hector Hernandez agreed to open a restricted border gate Monday in exchange for $5,000. Then on Tuesday, he allegedly arranged to take a duffel bag filled with meth from a storm drain and deliver it to a contact for $20,000. But that contact was actually an undercover agent, and Hernandez was arrested yesterday. He now faces drug and bribery charges.
Now, I know some people are saying, well, it was just a one-time thing. It's just one bad agent. Really? Yeah, I don't think so. That last one was from May. This one is from July. And Mr. Officer George here got caught doing the same thing. And they're not the only two. Here's another officer doing the same thing. And yet another one doing the same thing. Not to mention, local police departments getting in on the action as well. In multiple states. It's almost like it's a made-up epidemic. But we know Republicans don't actually care, because they like this kind of press, and they like to ship migrants all across the country, so they can claim that every state is a border state, and getting overran by criminals and illegals, and whatever else trigger word they want to use this week.
Good evening, good evening, good evening. Thank you for joining me here for Conversations with Taz and Think About It Thursdays. Now do you get it? Why you They keep saying that we have a crisis at the border, but they never talk about the northern border. And let's also not forget the white supremacist, the one that was in Charlottesville that took his own life. He was also trafficking also. So they're protecting their own interest, not actual citizens. They would sell us for a couple stacks and the right phone number. Now, over the extended holiday weekend, I know a lot of people ventured out to amusement parks, and a lot of people love the thrill of roller coasters. Kudos. But pay attention before you get on these roller coasters and even while you're in line. Here's why.
It's a crack on a monster roller coaster. An eagle-eyed dad recorded the disturbing video at the Carowinds amusement park in North Carolina. The support structure moves as the roller coaster rounds a turn.
I didn't think about how much it would shift until that first car came across. I'm not an engineer, but that's not normal.
And this isn't just any roller coaster. It's called the Giga Coaster and claims to be the tallest, longest, and fastest roller coaster in North America. First showed the video to a security guard.
My hand was shaking because I was thinking that this could fly off right now as I'm showing this video to the security guard.
Wagner's 14-year-old daughter rode it 8 times that day. The dad says he was concerned the staff at the amusement park wasn't reacting quickly enough, so he called the Charlotte Fire Department.
One of the support beams is completely separated up at the top.
Within an hour, the ride was shut down and will stay closed till further notice as an investigation gets underway today.
This is something that you and I can see. And if you and I can see it, it makes me wonder what else is wrong with that particular ride. I just don't understand why somebody could miss that.
I just did what I hope anybody else would have done.
Now, keep in mind, according to the park, they inspect all of their rides every day. This is yet another example that is capitalism over your safety and your care and concern. But I also want to want you to keep this in mind. I can't talk tonight. Because we're moving into the seasons of carnivals and festivals and things like that, where things are put up and put down very quickly. Be mindful. Be careful. An entire hour, but not only that, the first time that this crack was reported was June 1st. Quite a few days went in between, and they're like, oh, we'll take care of it. They had no intention. They had no intention. It wasn't until authorities were made known of it. And if he wouldn't have had video, I'm pretty sure they would still be rocking and rolling now. And as someone who's witnessed someone be thrown from a roller coaster, play no games. Play no games. We have to look out for ourselves because they're concerned about profit, and that's it. Now, a lot has been said about affirmative action since SCOTUS did what it did. But as with everything in life, nothing is just black and white. And the gray area is full of intersectionality and nuance. And from affirmative action, they're not stopping there. They're moving on to minority scholarships. But on the Ivy League level, the athletic scholarships don't go to who you think they go to. Take a look.
Okay, let's talk about affirmative action and recruited student athletes. A few days ago, I posted a study that showed that nearly half of all white students that were accepted to Harvard between 2009 and 2014 were recruited athletes, children of legacy students, children of faculty and staff, or had parents or relatives that donated to Harvard. Immediately I started getting comments like this one saying if we took out the athletes, then it wouldn't be true anymore. I actually want to zoom in on athletics in the Ivy League and show how in many cases it's still an example of how college admissions tilt in the favor of those who are affluent. I went to Yale as an undergrad and graduated in 2017. I think when we think about sports in the Ivy League, we immediately think about sports like basketball and football. But when I got to Yale, I learned that institutions like it set aside spots for sports that I'd never even heard of as a high school student. That's sports like crew, fencing, skiing, sailing, water polo, and so many others that I never had access to in high school. I didn't even know what crew was when I got to college, and a lot of these sports are overwhelmingly white and they require expensive equipment that many can't get access to. Yet court filings show that recruited athletes who also have high academics have an 83% chance of getting in compared to 16% for non-athletes. Think about the Varsity Blues scandal, where a few dozen wealthy parents bribed coaches at schools like Yale and told them to set aside spots for their children even though they didn't actually play that sport. I'm not saying that athletes at these institutions don't deserve to be there by their academics, but I do wonder about the legal ways that the wealthy use to take advantage of systems that favor legacies and athletes, and the pathways to elite higher education that are blinded to so many of us because we've never been there or never will be in these spaces.
Let me expand upon this. Now, we all remember Collegegate, and he touched on it a little bit, where you have these athletic recruiters coming out and recruiting kids who didn't play these sports or hadn't played sports at all. These children did not have the resumes, the academics, the nothing to qualify. All they had were parents with large enough bank accounts. And I don't know if you saw the docuseries regarding it, but they were even paying for tutors for the SAT and ACTs, but these kids weren't actually taking the test. Somebody else was going to take it for them. And even the athletes that do get accepted, that do have the grades, that do have the talent, is the competition really competition? Because if you eliminate people who are naturally athletic, people who have a drive, with people who were like, well, it's something cute to do at the country club, or at least I can have one thing from my high school on here. Because we've heard about athletes whose parents have had to move so they can have better training facilities, and the toll that it's taken, where you have one parent at home with the younger kids and one parent living in a whole different city and or state, or having to send their child off and trust that the host family isn't going to abuse or misuse their child. If only a handful of schools already only have these teams, and I don't care what school you go to, Ivy League or not, we know what sports the boosters love, because we know which sports are going to be the most profitable. You go to crew and fencing either because you love it or it's a status symbol. Now on to them trying to eliminate minority scholarships. And white women, keep in mind, in all technicality, you're a minority too.
Now that affirmative action's gone, Republicans are now going after minority scholarships. Robin Vos, who's a speaker of the Wisconsin State Assembly, promised that they'd be relooking in the fall at different programs that have scholarships, grants, and programs. But look at who's going to be targeted: Black Americans, American Indians, Hispanic individuals, and people from Laos, Vietnam, and Cambodia. The Supreme Court's decision didn't just repeal affirmative action. It's now made it so Republicans will go after any type of diversity in higher education.
They want to roll it back, not just to when colleges were all white, but think about it. When they were all white, they were also all what? Ding, 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 ding. Male. Because if you allow for child brides, eliminate abortion, you're either going to kill off the women or have to go back to shotgun weddings and marry them off back at the child bride stage, where the wife is not even legal to be able to sign for anything for herself, or even sit in the house by herself while cable is being installed. Who's going to send her to college? Who's going to even make sure she goes to school every day? With all of the information that I've looked up and conversations that I've had with former child brides who were able to escape, and many documentaries that I've seen, very few were allowed to finish school. And fun fact, I did not realize this until many years into adulthood. In high school, there was a young lady. She was technically in my graduating class. She was permitted to graduate the year before us, and she was so excited. She was graduating early to get married. And it didn't click on me when she was talking about her husband, her future husband, now husband. I think they're still married. I don't know. Because I personally never saw any hint of her, not on social media, not in the alumni groups, nothing. She never talked about them going out on dates. She never really talked about them spending time together and piecing together conversations previously. The things that she was excited to do with him. Yeah, this wasn't another 16, 17-year-old that she was marrying. And no, I was not in a small town. But want to see just how pissed off the GOP is regarding diversity? There's a Harvard lawsuit.
Good afternoon, folks. So, in the wake of the Supreme Court ruling on affirmative action last week, advocacy groups have sued Harvard in connection with their legacy admissions practices, right? A legacy admission is an admission based on your affiliation with a family or some contact with the university in the past. Right now, the allegation is that these legacy admissions aren't discriminatory on their face, right? Meaning, obviously, they don't admit or fail to admit certain people based on race or other qualities, but the effect is discriminatory. So, legacy admissions, because they are largely white, right, have discriminatory effect. It'll be interesting to see how this lawsuit turns out.
Yeah, see, the biggest problem with the GOP, and this is why I said the GOP, yes, I know advocacy groups, I don't know why I can't talk tonight, are behind this particular lawsuit. Conservatives specifically don't know how to just take a win and sit down. Now, remember the women's NCAA basketball championship, and they were so mad at a young Black woman celebrating with her young Black female teammates. Oh, she's doing too much. She celebrated that night. Why does she have to celebrate all week? Look at how they've been celebrating online regarding Roe v. Wade, regarding affirmative act, regarding all of these things. They love to taunt people, and now their taunting is kicking them in the butt, because if you're saying that it should all be a meritocracy, your grandfather, your mother, your father, your cousin, your sister, your uncle, graduating from there, previously going there, have donated, used to work there currently, that's not based off merit. That's based off connection. And see, I love how we call it legacy admissions instead of just nepotism. See how we just change the words in the situation to make it seem like it's less than what it is. Like we call it a family business when you know that everybody that's going to be your boss is going to be very underqualified most of the time. Now, before we get into politics, now I'm going to give you these two updates of sorts regarding OceanGate. Do realize they are not allowed to do anything else for a year, but I think they already know that, because the next expedition that they're marketing to their base, I guess, is already scheduled for sometime next year. Whether they'll be able to still do it, I don't know. But let's get into it.
It is Wednesday, July 5th, and I have some Titan sub things to talk to you guys about. Well, 5 things total, including this one. And we will be talking about them in this order. And before anybody comes into my comments and says it, yes, we are still talking about it because we find it interesting. Jaden Pan, who was a passenger on Titan sub back in 2021, told a story about where Stockton Rush told passengers that they should just go to sleep after the battery on the sub died. So basically, a little over 2 hours into the dive, one of the batteries went kaput. At this point, they were about the equivalent of 2 football fields away from Titanic when Stockton said that they were going to have to resurface and start going up. At first, the passengers thought they were kidding because they were already 2 hours into this descent. So Stockton Rush then explained that one of the batteries died and they were having trouble to use the electronic weight drops. And basically, they were going to have to wait 24 hours for the weights to dissolve so that they could then resurface. And so he said, maybe you guys should just go to sleep until all this happens. Apparently, half the crew, including Stockton, had no problem going to sleep on the ocean floor, but the other half didn't. And eventually, Stockton was able to get the hydraulics to drop the weights, and they were able to return to the surface. And Jaden did share a very brief, 30-second interview, which I'll play at the end of this video. So next I want to talk about this. A lot of people have asked me if the sounds that they've heard on TikTok and other social media platforms of the explosion and the knocking and the screams are real or they're not. They are not. Now, while the Navy has said that they do have sound of the implosion or what they believe to be the implosion, none of that has been released to the public at this point. So anybody who is sharing videos like this, they are just spreading false information and it is not part of what happened at all. This one I'm just sharing because a business chose to do this. Basically, Subway in Rincon, Georgia, which is near Savannah, kind of that low country area, put up a sign that said, "Our subs don't implode." This apparently upset a bunch of locals, calling it tacky, bad taste, and they actually got Subway involved itself, who reached out to the franchise and basically said that you can't do things like this and to take it down. So next is this, which I think is pretty damn messed up, but apparently a bunch of people took to gambling, over $300,000 in fact, on whether or not the submersible would be found and if people would be alive. What you could bet on included whether or not the sub would be found, if the people would be found alive, and if they would run out of oxygen. And the times that these things would happen. Now, this was all done on Polymarket and using cryptocurrency. A couple of the bettors were quoted in this article, including one guy named Brian who made $8,000 by betting that all on board would perish. Another gambler whose name was Rich made $3,250, and he basically tried to defend gambling on people's lives. He said, quote, "The markets are fundamentally immoral. There's no ethical consumption under capitalism." And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, so make sure to drop that in the comments. So finally, let's talk about this. I'm sure a lot of y'all have already seen or heard the alleged transcripts that were supposedly Titan's last communications with the mothership Polar Prince. And I've been asked if these are legit. So here's what I'll say about that. I have found no research that indicates that these are real or fake, that it's all alleged at this point. Nothing has also been officially confirmed, but it hasn't been denied either. So if you want my personal opinion, not as fact, just my opinion, I believe that the transcripts are real. I have no reason to believe that they're fake. As always, I will share the transcripts on my Instagram if you want to look there. And here is the video of Jaden Pan talking about what happened in 2021.
Stockton says, "Oh, we got to turn around." And at first I thought he was joking because we were over 2 hours into our expedition and so close to the bottom. But then he explained that one of the batteries kind of went kaput and we were having trouble using the electronic drops for the weights. So it would be hard for us to get back up to the surface. The stakes were quite high at that point. I was really intrigued with okay, so we can't get to the site tonight. What are our options? Is it under you, Bridget? We had discussed actually just sleeping at the bottom of the ocean in the submersible.
Jesus Christ, y'all. The more we learn about how OceanGate was ran, and this is just one of 2 things we're going to talk about. So apparently, OceanGate's former finance director quit after she was asked to become the chief pilot after they fired David Lockridge, who brought up safety concerns. And bear in mind, y'all, this is the finance director, this woman who had a background in accounting, not piloting submersibles. Apparently, he continued to urge her, and it made her feel uneasy enough to start looking for another job and eventually quitting. Now, apparently, she also talked about this. Apparently, Stockton hired a bunch of interns and college students, including some as young as 18, 19 years old, to help design key components of the sub, like the electrical system. She also said that a lot of those employees were making only $15 an hour, which I don't know about y'all, but I think I want somebody who's a little bit better paid designing components if I'm going 13,000 feet under the water. So at one point, Stockton tried to hire somebody named Rob McCullum, who is a deep sea exploration expert. Stockton took Rob over to the facilities, and Rob described it as seeing a bunch of teenagers drinking Kool-Aid and boasting about the fact that they were using a PlayStation controller at the time to control the sub. Rob immediately brought up the fact that all subs are hardwired because it would be a point of failure if Bluetooth failed. Rob also asked Stockton if he had reached out to Sony because using a PlayStation controller was not the application that it was meant for and was incredibly dangerous. Obviously, Rob turned down that job, but we're learning that you needed no experience at all to do anything at OceanGate. Whether that's pilot a sub or, design it. So like I said yesterday, y'all, I will be keeping you guys updated with all the absurdity that is OceanGate amongst a few other things in the coming days, so make sure to hit that follow button if you don't already.
So much to unpack. First of all, this goes to show, for everybody calling for empathy for the billionaires, they always say the billionaires club, the top 1%, things like that. You've heard me say the top 1%. I never say the billionaires club because it makes it seem as if they're intertwined. They are not. They are not. Because with all these people who were previously connected to thinking about, we're on this submersible, and all of the things that kept routinely going wrong, nobody spoke up. Nobody said anything. And this also, excuse me, goes to show that if nobody dies and it doesn't make the news, billionaires aren't going to tell you anything. They'll make you still want to work yourself into the grave to achieve what they've been given. They want you to, put this on your bucket list and spend all of your savings because they're now invested in the company. Nobody said anything publicly. Nobody said anything around Inside Circle. Nothing. Also, if you remember previously, the owner, Stockton Rush, kept making it seem like he just had this grandiose idea to give younger generations, a head start. And I don't want a 50-year-old. He wants younger people with no work experience because they don't know what skills are really needed. And it's probably a bunch of Nepo babies. And two, they don't know what to properly charge for the work that they're doing. 3, they have no idea of the rules and regulations that go hand in hand with this type of work. So they're not going to give him pushback. That's why they're sitting around like, yeah, this is so great. I can use the same controller that I have at home. Yeah. Now, those of us that have lived and grew up in the real world, first of all, you're hiring me for this experimental thing and you're only paying me $15. I have zero experience in this. And you're handing me a game baby, the way I would have ran out of there, ain't no way. Ain't no way. I've turned down offers that were too good to be true, that were on land. And 15, and you want me to develop and create? Get somebody else to do it. Now, Trump is not having a good week. Neither is DeSantis. But Trump stuff is more juicy now. Now, his top attorney, Mr. Lynn, to avoid being disbarred, has decided to quit the Trump team and officially retire with the promise that he will never, ever, 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 ever practice law again. But on top of that, nobody is willing to take the bullet for Donald John Trump. Nobody. And if you noticed, nobody's defending him. Nobody within the top tier. Even Marjorie Taylor Greene has backed up, and she got kicked off the Freedom Caucus. Now they're claiming that she's not right-wing enough. I think the real story is that she's too right-wing. But let's take a look-a-loo.
Uh-oh, Donald Trump just got some terrible news tonight. In a brand new interview, a top Republican official in Arizona who rejected pressure from Donald Trump and his allies to overturn the 2020 election in that state told CNN tonight that he has spoken with the FBI as part of the ongoing criminal investigation into efforts to overturn the vote. And that Republican official is former Arizona House Speaker Rusty Bowers. Now, you may remember Rusty Bowers from him testifying in front of the January 6th committee, but the fact that the Department of Justice is getting all of these people who Donald Trump himself tried to pressure to overturn the election shows that they're going after him and they're not holding back.
So yesterday, the Department of Justice filed a newly less redacted search affidavit regarding the Trump documents case. So I want to show you all like 3 lines that we learned. And it's really nothing we didn't learn before, but there was a motion to unseal it, and the Department of Justice was like, we don't want to unseal it, and the judge was like, you gotta give them something. So Jack Smith was like, here's 5 lines. It was former President of the United States practice to store accumulated documents in boxes, and that continues to be his practice. Some of the photos, storage room, more information about the boxes. They had this. This was in the search warrant affidavit. They had pictures. They knew the shit was there. And this little ditty, which again, about the boxes, how they knew they were there. So when everybody's like, oh my God, they just broke into Mar-a-Lago and raided the place. No. That's not how it happened. And now we have proof from the affidavit that was filed to get the search warrant in the first place. Somebody on the inside was sending them pictures long before Mar-a-Lago got raided. And that's delicious.
Let me just remind you all of this, because I know people are going to be like, how they take pictures and he has a Secret Service detail. Yes, he and his immediate family have a Secret Service detail, but the job of the Secret Service is to protect the people, not any property. Like the example I gave you all previously when I explained this, if somebody was to roll up and steal the car, they can call local authorities or stand there while you do. But their job is to make sure that the burglars don't do anything to you. And that's one thing that Trump forgot about when he decided to dox Barack Obama and his family. Like, they have Secret Service too. What did you think was going to happen? But that goes to show just how volatile Trump is. And if they would not have recollected those documents, and I hope that they got everything in every copy. Now, I don't know if they seized the laptop that was rumored to have scanned copies of these documents. I don't know. I haven't seen anything that definitively confirms that. But we lay people are not privy to discovery. So, that's the law. That's the rule of the land. That's cool. But we see that if he feels backed up in a corner enough, he knows that he has sycophants that are dreaming and salivating and having wet dreams about World Civil War 2.0. Pish posh. Pish posh. Now, you remember the 303 creative case, the woman that was like, a gay couple asked me to make this website for them. And then we found out, did nobody ask you to do nothing and ain't nobody paying for that? But I got 2 names in this document. You put the 2 names in there after you filed. One person doesn't exist and one person isn't gay. But it's the truth. It's the truth. It's the truth. And then I told y'all, Senator Josh Hawley's wife was the one litigating the case. Sister girl is about to be in all sorts of deep shit. But we have some updates. Child, you gonna need a beverage and start clutching your pearls.
The Supreme Court ruled yesterday in favor of a web designer. This case was already weird, and it's gotten weirder. The Washington Post did a great article on this. Let's quickly recap, and then we'll get to the new stuff. So, Lori Smith filed her initial case to Colorado's District Court in 2016, arguing that the state's anti-discrimination law prevented her from including a message on her webpage that stated she would not create wedding websites for gay couples. Should be noted, at this point, she had never created a website for any wedding. All over her documents, she mentioned a gay couple named Stuart and Mike that had approached her about making a wedding website. The funny thing is, she filed the lawsuit the day before she received the request from Stuart that was cited in the complaint. And she went as far as to quote Stuart, "We're getting married early next year and would love some design work done for our invites, place names, etc. We might also stretch to a website." Only Stuart told the Post he had never contacted Smith, which makes sense, considering he lives in another state. He is a straight man who was already married to a woman and had children, and he does web design himself. So why would he have asked her to do it? It makes no sense at all. The problem is the Supreme Court has said Stuart and Mike are kind of irrelevant. We didn't rule on Stuart and Mike. They said it didn't matter if she had received a real request from Stuart and Mike or anyone else. Smith filed a pre-enforcement challenge to the Colorado statute because the state would have probably moved against her if she had posted a statement about her intention to refuse service to a same-sex couple on her website. So it's about her putting the statement on her website that she would refuse service. That's the issue, right? Except this is where they lose me. Justice Neil and Gorsuch writing that it is a reasonable assumption because of Colorado's actions in other cases regarding same-sex marriage. On the merits, the court majority said the state of Colorado could not compel her to design any such site because it would force her to convey a message inconsistent with her belief that marriage, blah, blah, blah. Only here's the problem. She's not suing about that. She was suing about not being able to put it on her website in the first place. The only way that she would be compelled to do it is with Stuart and Mike asking her to do it, which they didn't exist and weren't part of the decision, I thought. That brings us back to Stuart and Mike. Why were they involved? Mike is imaginary, doesn't exist. Stuart is a straight man from another state who has no idea who Lori Smith is. So why, of all the human beings on the planet, was his information used in this lawsuit? Well, remember how she filed in 2016? You know what was going on in 2016? Stuart was working for the social media team of Hillary Clinton for her presidential campaign. Stuart was used because he worked for Hillary. That's why. Stuart out here saying what we're all thinking. There's responsibility on the part of Lori Smith's lawyers and legal representatives to do the due diligence and make sure that this evidence is accurate, unless they were part of falsifying it in the first place. This woman wanted to cosplay persecuted, so she made up an imaginary gay couple, and now the highest court in the land has taken the rights of gay Americans and set them back decades.
But dear heart, you didn't think that was all. The plot always thickens.
You know who this guy is? You need to stick around.
Don't know who he is, then definitely stick around. Because he's one of the reasons why we are losing our rights in this country. It's an organized, orchestrated effort to strip away American rights to have a more theocratical type of government. And I'm not kidding one bit. This is something he authored. The left's war on history is really a war on the God of the Bible. Okay. His wife. She's the woman that is currently being put into question over the case brought by Lori Smith, which pushed back LGBTQ plus rights. The one about the website. Hopefully this will all blow up in their faces. But in the meantime, I have to explain to you why it has to do with Roe. What all this has to do with Roe. And hint, Holly's wife also worked on that case. The Alliance Defending Freedom also did. And do you remember the abortion pill case? Surprise, surprise. Holly's wife also had to do with that case. You might remember this guy who pushed for the whole deal, hiding behind Holly's wife, who's a senator in the United States. And in case you didn't know that. Give me a break, Josh. A guy that kisses his wife like this doesn't know jack about masculinity. So these rights that are being overturned are coming from ideals from men like this guy and spouses of this guy. I mean, these people made up a hypothetical case for this moment, and it takes time. They even have a whole channel about it, where they talk about what their whole plan is. Do your research. I'm like, dude, you wouldn't even know what research was if it hit you on the frickin' MAGA hat. And now we have situations like this happening all over the country because Josh Hawley was brainwashed in the 80s by the Federalist Society. And so really, it's quite simple. It's not overly complicated. The reason why we're here right now is because a lot of rich guys had the means to create a society in the 80s when advances started to be granted to marginalized communities, and they think they're doing it in the name of God. And Moscow Mitch helped them by blocking Supreme Court nominations when Obama was president. Remember that? Same people that are funding this guy are funding these lawsuits. Only with money can you get a case like this up to the Supreme Court.
Senator Josh Hawley from Missouri and his wife are bad people.
At what point do you stop calling things coincidence and call them a plan? And quite honestly, the Federalist Society that promised to pay for Trump's legal representation, and we do know prior to this last arraignment, he was scrambling for an attorney in Florida. They are going to be his demise. He has fulfilled his purpose for them. And they have the Howleys, a well-oiled machine. A well-oiled machine that are willing to shoot themselves in the foot to spite everything else. Everything else. But you know, if you take away everything and all of your buddies are in power, how much trouble could you get in? Want to know why I'm asking that question? Scott Baio is saying that he's leaving California after 40 years because he's been blacklisted and blackballed. My guy, we saw you for a short period of time in Arrested Development, and you caused that to tank. Before that, nobody knew about you since Charles in charge. But that's not really what it is. Scott Baio is your bargain basement, regular degular schmegula, conservative creeper.
It's another episode of Actors Ruining My Childhood Nostalgia. This really triggered some of you last time. Scott Baio is in the news and somewhat relevant because he claims that he left California. It's become a third world country. He also claims that he's been blacklisted because of his support for Donald Trump. But was he really blacklisted? Because I had to actually go to IMDb and scroll down and see if there was anything at all that he'd done somewhat lately that I recognized. Besides Arrested Development, which he had to come back and ruin. Thanks so much for that. I recognized Charles in Charge, but then I remembered I didn't really ever watch that. I was more of a Who's the Boss girl because Angela would never. And also Mona is goals. And look at how cute Alyssa Milano was. Scott Baio is well known for his time on Happy Days as Chachi, but I was a little bit before my time. And then there was the spinoff, Joni Loves Chachi, which I've never seen. And I know a lot of y'all are going to fight it out in the comments. How good could it be? It only ran 2 seasons, the entire series. In addition to Scott Baio's unfortunate support of Trump and just general Twitter waywardness, his co-star Nicole Eggert has claimed that he sexually abused her while they were working on the show. She was a minor. What did happen in that garage, Scott? It must have been bad, because if your TV show that you are the star of, he's the one in charge, if they have 2 reunions and you aren't invited to either, sir. Also, if these are your counterparts when mentioned in the media, something has gone awry. I know, we all wanted more for Randy Quaid. But one of Scott Baio's greatest offenses for me is coming onto one of my most favorite TV shows, Arrested Development, and playing one of my most beloved characters, Bob Loblaw. Because now every time I watch that show, I have to think about his ridiculous politics. But I also get to look at Jason Bateman's face. So, net win. Anyway, Scott Baio says he does not feel like California is safe and sold his $3.7 million mansion to move to Florida. Because when I think of safe states, I do not think of Florida. And this has been another episode of Actors Ruining My Childhood Nostalgia. Stick around. We might do Christy Swanson next.
Get all the projection now? That's why we say every projection is a confession. I've been saying this for decades. Conservatism is nothing but smoke and mirrors. It is nothing but sleight of hand. They need you to look over there so they can screw you over here. But I hope he likes that malaria outbreak going on down in Florida. And 2 top health officials quit. Now, last night we briefly talked about the reformed MAGA hat. We have more. Of course we have more. It's Conversations with Taz. Take a look.
Neighborhood, but now another January 6th defendant, a grandmother and former Trump supporter who went to prison for her actions on January 6th, who's now speaking out against the former president for what she calls his gaslighting. Gary Tuckman has more.
As she celebrates America's independence at a fireworks show here in Boise, Idaho, 70-year-old Pam Hemphill can't help but remember how she felt on July 4th of last year, because she was getting ready to go to prison.
Even though you were unhappy and scared in prison, you feel you were guilty of what the crime was.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
The January 6th Capitol insurrection. Mother and grandmother Pam Hemphill, who had recently been diagnosed with breast cancer, was there. She had long enjoyed taking video of political events and told police at the Capitol she was a citizen journalist. But she also believed former President Donald Trump's false claims that he won the election. And this is what she was telling people outside the Capitol as she shot her video.
Whose house does it belong to? It's my house. Come on in. You just come in. Come on in.
She continued shooting video.
Where are the people?
And Pam Hemphill ended up inside the Capitol building. She flew back to Idaho, still believing much of the dogma she had been taught that led to her coming to the Capitol.
The Democrats wanted this to be a communist country and that they were drinking baby's blood.
Did you believe that?
No, I thought that was kind of weird.
Okay. But did you believe that it was the Democrats wanted this to be a communist country?
Yes.
It wasn't until months later that Hemphill was arrested on multiple charges. After a plea bargain and pleading guilty to illegal entry to the Capitol, she was sentenced to 2 months in a federal prison in California.
I live with the fear every minute. You just live with it.
When she got out of prison this past September, she did have questions about the far-right talking points about Trump, but still considered herself a Trump supporter. However, a few months ago, she had a revelation.
So when you heard the former president say that he would consider pardoning some J6ers, it changed your mind?
Absolutely, 100%.
And what did you then think of Donald Trump?
That's it. He's just a master manipulator. He doesn't believe anything. He just thinks he's smart enough to pull the wool over you. But there's people like me waking up.
And do you feel the former president's responsible for that?
Absolutely. He's the king of that gaslighting. It's a cult. It's a cult.
And then this happened just about a week and a half ago.
A right-wing person wrote something that's inaccurate, but it's important to this story. I'm going to read it. American justice, 69-year-old grandma with cancer given more prison time for walking inside U.S. Capitol than Hunter Biden for sharing classified documents with foreign regimes and multi-million-dollar bribery schemes. And then Donald Trump shared it on his Truth Social with the comment, horrible. When you saw that or heard about it, what was the first thing that went through your mind?
I got up, I was very angry, and I said, this is it. This is it.
In fact, Hunter Biden recently agreed to plead guilty to 2 tax misdemeanors to resolve a felony gun charge in exchange for a recommendation of probation. What Pam Hemphill decided to do was call out the former president on social media, writing, "Please, Donald Trump, don't be using me for anything. I'm not a victim of January 6th. I pleaded guilty because I was guilty. Stop the spin." And now Pam Hemphill wants to go back to the U.S. Capitol, but this time to testify under oath about January 6th. And she's already prepared what she wants to say if she's invited.
I am not a victim of the government. The Justice Department was not weaponized against me. I was a participant. We broke the law.
And she talks about the Capitol Police in her speech.
In the crowd, I was pushed down. My head was trampled on. My shoulder pulled out. The Capitol Police saved my life that day. I want them to know how truly grateful I am to them and how deeply sorry I am for what happened and how they continue to be treated to this day.
Today, Pam Hemphill takes solace in her supportive friends on social media, her family, and God.
What would you say to Donald Trump if you could talk to him face to face, like you're talking to me right now?
Retire, get honest, because you know, when you meet your maker, you know, that's more important.
Now, I wanted to share this update of sorts because it had additional information that we didn't have last night, especially the specifics of her timeline of waking up. But also, I wanted you to hear in her own words that the same people she was there, you know, to be side by side with, to take over the tyrannical government, pushed her over and injured her. They have no loyalty. They have no continuity. But they really have it in their mind that they can overthrow the government. Y'all can't even successfully overthrow a Cracker Barrel. Y'all can't successfully boycott anything. The amount of people who were injured that were there to participate in the insurrection that ended up injured by their fellow patriots is astronomical. It is ridiculous. But all they counter with is, but BLM. What? When Kyle Rittenhouse came and was shooting up the place, everyone at those protests that could rendered aid immediately. When police officers and anti-BLM protesters were trying to damage property and set things on fire, those that were in close proximity came together to stop it. See, when you have a sense of community, that's when you can move forward. But you knock this little old, that, remember they marketed her as a little old granny that they just put away in the prison forever. She was in there for 2 months. But y'all had no problem knocking her over, messing up her shoulder and everything else, and she got cancer. And as soon as she gets out and she dusts her clothes off, you don't apologize, you don't anything. And you were so back the blue until the blue didn't want to do what you do. I guess. Now, maybe you saw the viral video of the elderly couple being accosted and the woman being tossed to the ground. Nope, we're not going to go through that footage. I'm not going to have an emotional breakdown. But let's get into why the police were called and why the police were so aggressive. And I'm going to tell you, no amount of guessing will get you to why all of this happened. No amount.
Over a cake.
Unthinkable that it was that we're alleged to have stolen a cake. So basically this was all.
Stolen a cake?
Yes, that was the allegation, that they had shoplifted a cake. So let me be clear, nothing has been proven. It was alleged that they had shoplifted a cake, and that's how they came in hot like that.
The point is, you see two senior citizens and you're acting like you're in fear of your life. You see their whole person, you see their whole body. As you see, the lady in the video was just simply recording her husband's interaction with the deputies, and they came over and
No, self-checkout situation. I don't know if this is a situation going through with the cashier. And the reason why I say that is because I have been in line with Karens that have purposely put things on that little rack underneath the cart and not put it up for the cashiers. Sometimes somebody catches them and takes them over to customer service to pay for it, or they just take the item back, and a lot of times they just get on out the store. But a cake is something that you can see in the cart, that you can see in somebody's hand, that if they slid it into a bag, you can see it. And they had not even, it didn't even look like they made it to their car. So it sounds like the police were called while they were still shopping. Where were they going to hide it? Because that woman had on leggings and a shirt and a very tight-fitting jacket, like an athleisure jacket. An older man, from what I could see, he couldn't have fit a whole cake. I mean, if you're going to steal a cake, you don't want it smushed up to the side. That's what I would think. And even when the cops got there, they couldn't just look over into the cart. That was bad enough when they brutalized the man that they thought stole a frozen pizza and he had a whole receipt for it. And even though he kept crying out that he has a receipt, but you attack this couple. And last I heard, they're still trying to rack up charges against this couple. Let me repeat this. The police were defunded before. That's why we have EMTs and paramedics. Because believe it or not, there was a time where if you were having a heart attack or whatever, the police were showing up. And because they were incapable of doing that, but it is time to demilitarize and defund the police. And it is time to start having them go through psychological evaluations before even being permitted to apply, let alone go through the police academy. And the police academy should last a lot longer. Because all of these, I was bullied in high school, so now I'm going to be the big man because I'm a cop. All of these, I couldn't get into the military, so I'm going to cosplay the military. All of these, I hate anybody that's not like me, so if I perceive you to be not like me, I'm going to be jury, judge, and executioner. And there are police departments that are getting it right. Let me say that there are police departments that are getting it right with their training and their hiring practices, because you don't hear about them. People are just doing their jobs. It's not their whole personality trait. It's not going to their head. Now, the intoxicated Karen story, I'm going to leave till tomorrow. And the case regarding the Twitter lawsuit, I'm going to leave until tomorrow. But it wouldn't be a show if we didn't have an episode of our dun-dun-dun-dun telenovela. Yes, we got updates. Here we go.
Day 5 in the extradition hearing of Arthur Knight, aka Nicholas Rossi. Today was weird and yucky. So today ordinarily would have just been a formality. Opposing counsel would have submitted their closing arguments and the judge would have gone away to decide. But nothing about Arthur Knight is ordinary, so of course, today wasn't either. Defense attorney Mungo Bovey said, "We don't have any more witnesses to call." Knight exploded at his lawyer over this and said, "I do! Counsel is dismissed!" Mungo Bovey and Arthur Knight argued over this in the courtroom, but Mungo ultimately relented and allowed Knight to call on his surprise witness, a friend he made in prison. This man, 59-year-old William King, who is currently in prison for, how do I put this delicately? Kids. Stuff involving kids. Yeah, I just need to slow everything down here for a second. Arthur Knight, who is accusing the Utah prosecutor trying to extradite him back to the United States of being a child sex abuser, has one friend he made in prison who is a child sex abuser. But of course they'd be friends. They've got so much in common. They're both rapists. One guy's a knight, the other guy's a king. It's a match made in heaven. Okay, not heaven, the other place. It's a match made there. But is it any wonder that Mungo did not want his client to call on this guy to be a character witness? You're not really going to create a whole lot of sympathy with the court if this is the kind of company you're keeping. Anyway, this monster testified that the prison staff have been horrible tonight and cited an incident where Knight fell to the floor and the prison staff would not help him up. In fact, they taunted him to get up off the floor by himself because there was nothing wrong with him, a diagnosis that has been confirmed by the prison doctor. King said they picked on him from there. It was constant hounding. Every time he asked for help, they refused. Because, yeah, he's faking. The prison doctor says he's faking. Every one of us knows he's faking. I don't know how the UK prison system works, but I don't think that you are legally required to indulge a fabulist. King told Mungo that he'd never seen Knight walk. That's a sentence. And that the prison staff said they were going to take the wheelchair away and rip that oxygen mask right off of him. Again, the prison doctor says he does not need the wheelchair or the oxygen mask. It is not a hardship, nor is it abuse to take those things away from him. King claimed that Knight's condition has deteriorated and that he is withdrawn into his shell, adding that prison isn't good for him. Who is prison good for? Never mind. The judge repeatedly had to warn King that he would put an end to the testimony if he kept straying from Mungo's questions, and ultimately put an end to it outright at the 10-minute mark when King launched into a monologue challenging the prison doctor's findings that Knight is physically fine. The judge ended the Zoom call, and you would have thought that would have been the end of the circus, but there was still plenty of crazy left in the tank. This video wound up being crazy long, so I'm breaking it up into part 1 and part 2. But don't worry, you don't have to wait for part 2. I'm posting both videos simultaneously, and part 2 is the video right after this one. Go, watch it! Day 5 of the extradition trial of Arthur Knight, part 2. Don't start with this one. Watch Day 5 Part 1. It's the video right before this one. And if this is your first experience, go back to Day 1. This story is crazy. So after William King, the child-abusing monster, had been dismissed from court, Mungo tried to play for time and asked the court for an extension so that they could submit more evidence in the defense of Arthur Knight. And the judge was like, nah, this charade's gone on long enough. And you would think that Knight was all out of time and all out of cards to play, but oh no. Because at that very moment, Knight started having an attack, experiencing shortness of breath, and his oxygen levels in fact did drop a few points, as would happen to you or I if we started intentionally hyperventilating. Regardless, the courtroom was cleared and Knight's oxygen levels returned to normal. Mungo once again tried to capitalize on this episode and said that Knight's condition was clearly deteriorating and that he shouldn't be sent to the United States because of it. Bovey also tried to argue that Utah had waited too long to try to extradite him. The alleged rape happened in 2008, but the rape kit wasn't tested until 2017. Mungo then tried to play the sympathy card and argued that Knight would have difficulty functioning in social and family domains, a reference to his dependence on his wife, Miranda. Knight's wife, who is just as nutty as he is and is suspected of helping him fake his own death, has been faithfully by his side this entire time. Mungo said in Knight's defense that he was married in the UK to a UK citizen, lived here with her, and was looked after by her. And to be stripped of her and sent back to America, that would be hard on both of them. Which is not an incorrect statement. But I also don't think it's enough to keep this guy from getting sent back to America to stand trial for rape. And after tugging at the court's heartstrings, Mungo then asked the judge to release Arthur Knight on bail. Hang on, the serial rapist who faked his own death and fled the country, you don't think he's a flight risk? No? And look, I'm gonna hand it to Mungo. For a court-appointed defense attorney who probably hates his client, he's doing the best job he can to try to get this guy released. The guy probably is a really good defense attorney who just happens to be saddled with a really, really horrible client this time around. Anyway, the court obviously denied the motion. This guy is not getting out on bail. And with that, court is adjourned until July 12th, where it will be reconvened and the judge will render his decision on whether Knight will be extradited to stand trial in the USA. Until then, Arthur Knight or Nicholas Rossi or Nicholas Oliverdian or whatever the hell his name is being sent back to Edinburgh prison, where he's just going to have to wait, with or without his wheelchair and oxygen mask. And I promise you, as soon as court reconvenes, I will have an update for you. I plan on following this guy all the way until he is firmly in the clink. Stay tuned.
So it looks like we're going to have a mid-season break. But Mr. King, with all his theatrics, like, he knows he's not getting out of prison. And that's my question. What is in it for him? Like, I get pushing Mr. Knight around because he's getting paid to do that. But if Knight gets out of prison, dude, like, what did he promise you? Like, what is he going to send you stuff? And who's dressing Arthur? Because remember, he said, I can't raise my arms. I can't stand up. I can't do anything. And there are a lot of people asking, why don't the prison guards just take his wheelchair and his oxygen mask? If we've seen all of his theatrics thus far while having them, could you imagine the lawsuits, the complaints, the everything that he will put through if they actually made him prove that there's nothing wrong with him? So yeah, we have to wait for July 12th. For the season to continue of dun 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 as the night turns. I can't. I can't. Once again, thank you all for joining me here for Think About It Thursdays on Conversations with Taz. I'll see you all tomorrow for Freeform Fridays. As always, each one teach one, each one reach one. Later, Gator.